Welcome to the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I'm dedicated to helping you take control of your life. Are you ready? Let's go do this. So Cheri, I'm so glad you're here. It was a delight to get to know you, and I'm glad that Heather connected us. I would love you to just go into your background, and I'm looking forward to learning more about your work and your book around autism. So let's just go from there.
All right, perfect. Well, Sue, thank you for having me. I'm very excited and glad Heather connected as well. Heather's very good at that, right? So Heather, if you're out there watching, shout out to you for sure. But I'm Cheri Dixon. I'm here in Houston, Texas. I've been here basically since I graduated from college in 1995. I am very old, not very old, but older than what I feel some days, right? But I came to Houston after college and took my very first teaching position. At the time, it was very hard to get positions up in the small town in Iowa that I'm from. And so I took a leap of faith with my ex-husband and daughter, and we came here and we just stayed here forever. But I went into the world of education. I always knew I was going to be a teacher. I actually wanted to be a physical education teacher to start because I wanted to help people learn how to live a healthy lifestyle so that they wouldn't have eating disorders later on in life. That was, my mom had struggled with some body image issues, and I just saw her really, really battle that. And so I wanted to be able to do something. Nobody says that when they're 6, but I did. And I went to college. I finished my first degree in physical education. But I became a teenage mother and I had to make some adjustments. And so I changed my degree plan to elementary education. And so when I came to Houston, I started teaching in the elementary classroom. I taught all content areas, which typically elementary teachers do. And I loved it. I really loved it. And about 5 years in, my principal called me down to the office. I thought I was in trouble and not knowing what I had done, but of course thought I was in trouble. And she said, "Hey, congratulations. We're going to take you out of the classroom and we're going to start grooming you to be one of our principals soon." And I was thinking, no. And she was like, yes. And so that's when my journey began in leadership. And I found that I had a lot of great skills, right? I knew how to organize people and manage people and all of the things, but I didn't necessarily have all of those good leadership skills, as in knowing how to empower people to do the work, right? But over the years, I was very fortunate. I had some amazing mentors. I was able to study at amazing places. My master's degree is from the University of Houston, and they have such a great program there. And then I even got to study at Harvard University for a summer at their principal center. So that was a great experience as well. I continued on. I became a principal. I stayed in the seat for 16 years, which was a long time. But basically, I would be hired to be the person to come into failing schools and fix them. So we would do what's called a turnaround. It had to be done quickly because the state would come and take them over if not. And I did 2 schools here in Houston. And for a brief moment, I went back to Iowa. I was in Des Moines, Iowa for a couple of years, and I did a school there as well. And I loved all of the work. I loved growing teachers. I loved building communities. I loved helping these schools get to be the best that they could be, right? And I went through a lot of challenges while I was in the principal seat. The most recent, we had Hurricane Harvey here in Houston. And if you don't know about that storm, I mean, it was devastating. Over 100 inches of rain and just wiped out so many areas in the city. We went through that. Of course, the pandemic. We had a year where the refineries were having difficulties here. Houston is very oil and gas, and some of the refineries were emitting different chemicals into the air. And so we had to cancel school a lot. But what I found is that as I developed my skills and as I learned how to empower people, and as I learned more about the principal seat and just the leadership role itself, I stayed very focused on growth. Growth is probably the most important thing that you can do in any organization. And I even posted something on social media today about getting 1% better every day. If we stay focused on small growth every day, eventually it's going to compound. and you're going to be at the level that you absolutely want to be. And I believe everybody can learn and grow. And so that's kind of been my philosophy. And as I left the schoolhouse, I now do leadership development coaching with women, because I also believe that this is the year of the female entrepreneur. And the better we are at our skills, plus bringing in all of those great feminine qualities that we have,
Yeah.
we are going to do some amazing things in this world.
Small steps do lead to big wins, don't they? What are some of I love your story because it seemed like it just unfolded like one day after another. I think you probably would agree that you didn't think it was going to go in the direction that it did, right? Yeah, I don't think we ever think about it that way. What are some small steps that you're taking today that you're doing and that maybe even prompted you to post that post that we get 1% better each day?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll be honest. When you're in one career for a long time, you get real good at it, right? I was at that place where everything was pretty automatic for me. I could run a school. I would still have to put in the hours and the time and the work, but it wasn't like I was redeveloping things every year. I could bring it in and make small adjustments. And I built a great reputation in the school world. I felt like a big fish in a little pond, right? But moving into entrepreneurship is totally different. I joke all the time. We would open our doors at the school and our customers would come running in and they'd probably bring you a lollipop or a sucker or a soda or a apple or something because they love you so much, right? Just because you're the school. But in the business world, it's not quite the same. Now you have to rebuild your reputation. And a lot of times with the work I did, people would say, oh, well, you just work with children all day. How are you going to be able to help me in particular? No, that's not true. But that's the perspective that's out there. So I had to rebuild that. I also had to learn how to organize my own world. I'm sitting here in my home office. I get up every morning. I'm by myself. I could work or I could not work. It's totally up to me, right?
Yeah, right.
I don't have a boss. Nobody's telling me you got to start at this time of the day, finish at this time of the day, etc. So I think a lot of my growing and learning has been really knowing how to shift. I didn't have to get rid of all my skills I had before, but I had to shift. I had to become more independent. I had to become more focused. I'm very ADHD, and I had a system when I was running schools to accommodate that, but I didn't have a system for that now. I wanted to do all the things, and you'll hear I have a lot of projects going on. I don't sleep much. It's just I can do a lot of things, but then sometimes you also have to remember when you do a lot of things, are you going deep into those things or are you just doing them at a surface level? And I found that I was doing a lot of things at the surface level. So again, I had to get better every day at learning how to get focused. 9 months in, I would have to say I am moving in the right direction, but I still have a long way to go. But I
Yeah.
guess that's the joy of it all, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's about the journey, isn't it? It's
Mhm.
not always about the destination. And honestly, when you get to the destination, it's like, okay, what's next? You've accomplished that goal. What are some things that you do to help you stay focused and then not stay on the surface, but then again, go deep into what you need to do in order to move your needle forward?
I've learned to be very, very conscious of my calendar. I have a digital calendar, but I do keep a paper calendar, and I am like married to my checklist. So I time block my day. Every day has a theme. So Mondays might be for, I'll just say recording, Tuesdays might be content creation, etc. And then within the day, every 30 minutes, I'll say what I'm going to be doing. And then I have to check it off. Because another thing is I'll start things and then not finish them sometimes, right? That's another characteristic of ADHD. So I have to show myself, you did this, check. Almost like giving myself the smiley face, right? For getting the task done. In addition to that, I keep a checklist for the week. So I don't necessarily have to do these things on a certain day, but they have to get done before the end of the week. And if they're not done on Friday, guess what? You're working on Saturday or Sunday. And so that's one way I keep myself organized, in addition to setting timers and those types of things. But I've embraced this whole idea of like a power hour, to where I'll say, okay, and I live with my dog, right? Okay, let's go for our walk at 11. We come in, now I'm going to work for 1 hour. And I shut myself in here and I work on the one thing for that hour. And then I give myself an opportunity to take a break. Maybe go back out with the dog, get a drink of water, maybe call a friend, whatever it is. But it gives my brain a break, because that 1 hour, I'm going deep. I'm going to get tired. But if I don't, I will flitter around. That's my word. I just flitter and I just kind of float, and I'll look at everything. And
Yeah,
so,
I hear myself in you as you're talking.
yeah, I mean, I think it
I
happens
really
for
do.
so many of us, right?
Yeah, I mean, and we can get so distracted too. I mean, social media, just like think of Facebook or scrolling on anything's Facebook, Instagram, X, doesn't matter. You could start scrolling and you tell yourself, yeah, I'm only going to do this for a minute. And then you look up and it's like, oh shit, it was like 20 minutes later. Where did that go? But I can relate to the deep work too. I do the same thing. You're in the process of writing a book. You have to go into it to stay focused. And then sometimes you have to take that break. So it's, it varies, but I heard the maximum is like 4.5 hours. What prompted you to leave the education world and leave being a principal and take that leap to go out and be an entrepreneur?
I have to be honest, I get this question a lot. And I'll say it is a good question, because one thing we learned in the pandemic is that we always need teachers, we always need principals, we'll always need schools, right? Working remotely for that kind of environment just doesn't work. It's a steady job and it's always going to be there. And it's very structured. You always know your pay, you always know you'll have benefits, that kind of thing. And it was a hard decision to leave, because it wasn't that I didn't love it. I loved my job. But what happened for me, I got divorced 13 years ago. And I started to feel myself become a little bit antsy. I say a little bit, is this the right place for me? I had been a principal for about maybe about 3 years at that point. And of course, my ex-husband blamed my job for everything. And I started to question that. Well, maybe I was working too much. Maybe I was too focused on advancing my career. I had actually considered becoming a superintendent. And I had final level interviews at Texas A&M to start my doctoral degree. And I actually canceled them, because I thought, no, maybe I am being too selfish and self-centered and just focusing on my career. Well, that led me to this rabbit hole of, maybe I should be looking at a different something. Maybe I want to, and I know it was a lot of my sadness and overwhelm from the divorce, but I just started to question everything about my life. However, I stayed in it. I went to Des Moines during that time. I came back. I took on my last job here in Houston, and again, loved it all. But as I was turning 50, one of my very close friends, her and her husband and their 2 daughters, got off a flight from vacation. Within 2 hours, he fell out and passed away.
Oh, wow.
And they were in their 50s as well. And it put everything into perspective for me. Because one thing I did do when I went back into this whole mode of, no, I'm going to stay in education and make big things happen, I dedicated my life to the job. I didn't take vacations. I didn't take time off. I was 24/7. And that event for my friend, just seeing her so sad. But then she made this comment, I'm so glad we took time for each other. I'm so glad we went on this vacation. And I thought, what if I pass away tomorrow? I'm turning 50. What if I pass away tomorrow and I have not done so many things in my life? So I started to look for different things to do. And that's when I wrote my first chapter in a book. And that led to a second book. And then that led to a talk show. And I started to think, wow, maybe I don't have to stay in education. Maybe that feeling 13 years ago where I was thinking I could do something different, maybe I really can do that. So I gave myself a year and I said, I'm leaving. I'm leaving at the end of the year and I'm going to try this. Has it been easy? Absolutely not. Do I ask myself often, what the hell were you thinking? Absolutely.
But do you find that the benefits that you reap are far greater than the struggles or challenges that you have?
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
that's the thing. I even got called 2 weeks ago about applying for a principal job again. And it would
Gosh.
be partnering with my former assistant principal doing that again. And it would have been like the dream job. But I really had to say, sorry, that's not for me. My heart's
Wow.
not there now. My heart is here. And
Yeah.
every day I get better. And every day things get better. And every day I hear from a woman that I've had an impact on, or I help a business get a little bit better, or somebody start their company. And those are the things that I know I'm on the right path.
Yeah. So let's talk about your current endeavors, about the books that you have and TV and podcasts and stuff. So you go from principal to podcaster to author to TV
Absolutely.
host.
All right. So hang on, because this is a wild ride. So I actually have always loved to write, and I love to teach kids to write. That was always kind of my forte. And I got connected with a company, She Rises Studios. They are my publishers. And it was probably July of 2022. And I was actually talking with them about being a guest on their podcast, because this is when I was really saying, okay, I'm going to make this transition. So we set up the time for the podcast. But when the conversation was done, the person I was meeting with said, hey, but we'd really like for you to write in our upcoming book. And I was like, oh, okay. And I mean, I wrote, before in college and as a kid, but I
Yeah.
didn't do it in my adult life. I was a blogger, but nothing formal. And she's like, yeah, we've got this book. And so the book came out in October of 2022. It's called Unleash Her. It's
What
an
did you write about? What did you write
it's
about?
well, it's a compilation of 30 authors who write about their moment in life where they knew they were built for more, and they
Mm.
unleashed the power to be able to do whatever it was that they wanted to do in life. And I write specifically about the moment I had my daughter, and I knew I had to step up and be that strong female role model for her. And it's an international bestseller. So I was like, okay, I can do this, right? But it's just one chapter. It took me, I was on a flight somewhere, and I wrote the chapter on the flight, and then I edited the chapter on the flight back, right? So it was like a few hours of time. Well, then that led to a second book, and that one's about leadership, female leaders. That's a chapter again. And so then in the meantime, I thought, well, I like to talk. And a podcast is great because you don't have to really get in front of a camera, right? So I started a podcast. At least my podcast isn't video.
Mm.
And it was ugly at first. It was raw, right? It was kind of messy.
They all are. They all start that
Yeah.
way. My early ones from last year, they're all like
It
they're
is.
rough. They're rough.
You're talking to yourself. But I got real
Yeah.
good at talking to myself. And then after the books came out, then She Rises Studios purchased a production company, Phoenix TV. And they were like, hey, we've got this great opportunity. What do you think? And I was like, okay. And
It's like fun.
yeah, so I thought, what's going to happen? I'm going to gain experience. And if it really is awful, well, then, okay, I do it for 6 months and I don't do it any longer. So I started my show, Confident, Courageous, and Clear with Cheri. It ran from March of 2023 through August. And that was season 1. And I won an award
Oh,
for
good
the
for you.
first season. I got
Wow.
People's Choice Award.
And that was TV, right? That was
It
on
was actually, it was through Phoenix TV, and it was on Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire. So
cool.
yeah, so I thought, okay, well, maybe I kind of know what I'm doing, right? So then I planned for season 2, which is out now, and season 2 has been amazing. I've had some amazing guests. But in the meantime of that, Phoenix TV released that they could do documentary films.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I do my own filming, my own editing, everything. I do it on my own. But when I first became a principal, I noticed that a lot of families were struggling when their children would be diagnosed with autism. And that was way back in 2006. And even as my last year as a principal, I would still see families struggle with the diagnosis. And a lot of it was because there's just so many variables
Hmm.
and so many places on the spectrum that a student could be or a child can be, or anybody with the diagnosis, that it's hard to say, okay, you have this diagnosis. This is what it's going to look like. This is what you should do, mom and dad, to be able to help your child. It doesn't work like that. And so it's a lot of trial and error and a lot of frustration sometimes, a lot of success sometimes. And during my years as the principal, my priority was my special education programs. My brother was in special education growing up, and I just felt like too many times kids get pushed to the side when they have differing needs. I also focused a lot on the GT programs because my daughter's GT, gifted and talented, and they get pushed to the side too because as teachers, we know how to help the average student, right?
Hmm.
But when
Yeah.
you're at a different end of that average, it's hard. So I wanted to make sure that families knew we were partnering together and that we were working together. And over the years, I kept in my mind, kept thinking, I need to do something. I need to do something to help people in the world feel like you're not alone in this journey and share the good things along with some of the challenges so that you can prepare yourself. And so when that opportunity presented itself, I was like, okay, let's see what we can do here. So I was planning on one film only covering elementary years. But as I started planning and talking with people and getting to know more people, connecting with more people,
Yeah.
it became an 8 episode series.
Wow.
And it released on April 1st. It's called Somewhere on the Spectrum, Navigating the World of Autism. And we banded each episode. So we've done our introduction of the team, we've done the early childhood years through elementary. I just finished secondary schooling, and I'm releasing next week young adulthood and recording for middle age because those are things I never even thought about as a principal.
Right.
Those were not in my
Right.
wheelhouse, but I'm learning so much.
Well, they weren't in
And
your world.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So that's out. So that's very exciting.
Wow. Congratulations. That
Thank
is
you.
very exciting. How long did
Yeah.
it take you to film all this? Like to collect all the data
So
and put this
yeah,
documentary together?
well, it's been in my mind for about 20 years,
Yeah,
right?
right.
But
Yeah. That's how they all start.
yeah, once I got, kind of an idea of what I was going to do, and then started meeting with people that wanted to be involved, and then outlining episodes, and then actually recording for the episodes, and then editing the episodes, I think I've spent probably close to 50 hours on this so far. And I still have 4 more episodes to create.
Oh, wow.
So it takes some time. Now is more the creating of these episodes. So it's maybe about 2 to 3 hours per week. But that initial planning and preparing and outlining and figuring everything out, getting contracts together, because it almost has become its own little business, right?
Yeah.
But if it does what I hope it does, and that's to just support at least one person, then it's worth it for
Yeah.
sure.
What were some of the surprising things that you learned while going through this process, either about autism itself or the people that you met or even filming while you're doing this?
A lot of really neat things have come out of it. I have one young lady that she's a student at Texas A&M University studying neurodiversity and wants to continue to go on and help people like her. And
Mm.
she's the most unique little fun girl with great stories. And at first when I started filming with her, she was real conscious, right? She wouldn't look in the camera. Even when it was just her and I talking through a Zoom, she wouldn't look at me at first either, which is a characteristic, of course. But as we've gotten to know each other, and I said to her last week after we filmed, I said, all right, you're on my team now. So I'm going to keep a watch of what you do for the rest of your life.
Oh,
And
wow.
she looked at me and smiled. And,
Oh,
it made me know that I had that connection with her. Something that's been really surprising, meeting with people that work in the realm of post public schools. When your child is diagnosed, they need to, dependent upon your state or country, But if you're going to have assistance for them as adults, they need to do it at that moment, because it can take 15 to 16 years on a waiting list to get assistance.
Wow.
So if you think about somebody who doesn't get diagnosed until they're maybe 15 or 16 years old themselves, specifically in Texas, this person was talking about, but they could have to wait until 32 to be able to receive any kind of Social Security or Medicaid or any kind of
Oh,
assistance like
wow.
that, especially if they need more structured services in adulthood.
Huh.
So, I think that there's just so much about this that none of us know. And
Yeah.
pulling all of this information together, again, I think it will shed some light on
Yeah.
the journey that these neurodiverse people have to endure. Yeah.
Wow. For
So
for the for those who are listening and are not familiar with autism, and that would actually include me, and maybe it's just because it's not part of my world, I haven't really looked into
mhm.
what it is, but how would you define or explain autism to somebody?
That's a really good question. And it's really hard because, again, there's so many points along that spectrum. But
Okay.
basically, what I would say is this: they think in a different manner. They're neurodiverse. And that's one of the new descriptors for this population, meaning that there's something going on neurologically that interferes or creates these different patterns in people that will affect communication. It will affect their patterns of behavior. Of course, some are on a very high end, so you might not ever even notice it. And
Hmm.
some are on the very low end, and they may encompass every characteristic that's being described. But what I always said was, we are unique in our own way, every single one of us, and we have to embrace that uniqueness and figure out what works for each and every person. And I never say the word normal. I've learned to use typical. What would be a neurotypical
Hmm.
person as compared to a neurodiverse person? But again, I think the characteristics are just so vast. But a
Hmm.
lot that it has to do with is those typical communication patterns and behavior patterns. For example, I've seen a lot of students, when we start to suspect as school people, maybe not speaking, or maybe when they're with other children, they don't play together, but they parallel play. So they're playing, but they're separate. So they're not engaged in what the group might be doing, but they're doing their own thing. I've seen others where they're very fixed on a specific topic. I had a student once that dinosaurs, everything was about dinosaurs. So whenever he would answer questions in the classroom, every answer was something about dinosaurs, which didn't match what the conversation was, right? So it's
Oh, uh-huh.
these different patterns that you start to see. But I have also seen some extremely intelligent people that you would go, huh, something's just not quite right with this person, but they're so smart. And you start to wonder if they're being defiant, but they're not. It's just that's their behavior. That those are their patterns of behavior.
Mhm.
So it is hard, but I will say this for parents out there: if you start to suspect maybe something just doesn't look typical as compared to other children or other people of that same age group, that's when you have to start asking questions. And
Mm.
you can start with your school, you can start with your doctor, but there are people trained out there to support and help. And even if you suspect, doesn't necessarily mean that your child or you
Right.
yourself are going to be diagnosed, but it's better to wonder and then get the support if you need it than
Yeah.
to continue to suffer.
Well, with
Because, oh, I was just going to say, one of my guests on the show shared, you have to remember this: they already know that they're different. So they can go through life wondering why they're so different than everybody else in their school or everybody else at their job or whatever. Or you can give them some answers and some supports along the way.
hmm. So, yeah, my thought was, since it's such a wide spectrum, like, you can't there's so many different characteristics. How then is it diagnosed?
So I can speak specifically about Texas that, we can diagnose at the school level here. I know that there are but it has to be with a psychologist. And
Mhm.
then there are private psychologists, of course, that will diagnose. But we look for two things in the schools. We look to see if the pattern of behaviors match the patterns that would be within the spectrum. And number two, is it affecting their schooling in some
Mm.
kind of way? And that could be academics or behavioral or emotional. But a psychologist is typically who does all of that diagnosis, and they're specially trained in the ability to do that.
Mm. Okay. Okay. In your documentary and the people that you've come in contact with, so you've had experience at the school level. What did you find most surprising when you went into the young adults that have autism or the adults with autism, where it would be different than what you would have seen at the school age level?
I think one of the most surprising things for me is the fact that public schools really are a great thing, right? We have the whole gamut somewhere within that district. You're going to have the different kinds of supports that are needed, at
Yeah.
least here in the United States. One of my guests is from Canada, and their schooling back in the day didn't have all of that, but has evolved. And then I have another guest from Africa, and their schooling does not have that. But here in the US, public schooling systems have the supports that are necessary for anybody on the spectrum, high end, low end, and in the middle. However, when you become an adult, that's not always the case. A lot of adults that are on the high end, they can be totally independent with a few support services. Then you've got those in the middle that need more. And there are some community centers or private institutes or nonprofits that support. There's one right here in my area that she'll be speaking on this next episode about what they do. But when we spoke initially, they do not take people on the severe end because they don't have
Mm.
the capability. So then where do you find facilities that you
Okay.
trust in
Yeah.
order to take on that responsibility? Because one characteristic, it's not common across everybody, it's just one characteristic, is that these people tend to be very strong and
Physically. You mean
physically
physically? Okay.
physically strong. And so if you're having behaviors, outburst kind of behaviors, and now you're 22, who in the home can take care of that? That can be a concern. So I think there's just so much out there that we'll never touch upon all of it within our 8 episodes, but at least we're giving a glimpse into the world of what could be and what could be options for people.
Mhm. What are some of those support services that you talked about? Like, what would that look like for people with autism?
So here, one thing we have is this group is nonprofit is called Inspire ND. And so they start working with families when the child is 16 so that they start working on the transition of what will happen later. And they work with even those that are on the higher end, just doing maybe some coaching or checking in with them through Zoom or, maybe little check-in meetings if they're not locally, all the way to those that maybe they come every day so that they have a supervised structured activity
Mm.
all day long. They might do some crafting, they might do some daily living skills, learn how to make toast or make coffee or do the laundry or wash dishes. And then they even go out to local businesses at the grocery stores and teach them how to be the sackers at the grocery store. Or maybe like Chick-fil-A partners with this group here, and they go and they like go do the handout of the condiments and things at the Chick-fil-A. That's an amazing service here. Not every community has that, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
It's going to depend on the size of your city, what's available. I know that on the west side of Houston, I have not been, but there's a community for maybe higher end residents. However, they're not totally independent and they live within this community. They have their own grocery stores, they have their own retail stores, their own post office, so to speak,
Wow.
that they can utilize all of the services, but then there's always some kind of overseeing, right? Or overview or
Yeah.
supervision within that community. And I've heard it's a very great community, but I have not been able to connect with them. But I know in my small hometown, there just are not those services. And so if you need a residential kind of placement, you're looking at the same kind of facilities that you would think of for your elderly, right?
Yeah.
Your assisted living kind of communities. And that, of course, doesn't always match people's needs. So it just depends on the resources that you have within your reach, of course.
Wow, that sounds like a big challenge because you have such a wide spectrum of people that need services. From what you're saying, it's hard to pinpoint
Mhm.
a lot of it, of what they need and what their needs are, and then how to, help them from a
And then, of course,
practical
the
and the
cost of it,
cost of, yeah,
right?
I can't, yeah, the cost too,
Mhm.
because where does the burden of the, who does the burden of the cost fall on then for,
Well, it's going to come back on the families unless you get those services, right? Your Social
mm,
Security services or your Medicaid services. But again, if you don't know to get on those wait lists early, you're going to be waiting a long time to be on there. There are ways that you could do private insurance and things like that, but you would have to check in with your financial planner, to know exactly what that would be. I wouldn't want to give that kind of advice,
right, right.
specifically, but you just have to look at what your options would be and then how do you figure it out. But it's very similar to knowing, long-term care planning. What do you do for
Yeah.
your elderly parents, at the time, and who's going to pay for that? The
Yeah.
burden's got to come back somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I would think for parents that have autistic children, they have to have some provisions for
Mhm.
them after they pass away because that's a,
And
I
I'm
mean,
glad you mentioned that because episode number 6, we're going to be speaking. It's totally about a woman up in Canada who now is the caretaker of her 2 elderly brothers. One is
mm,
65 and one is 71. And after their parents passed on, she got that responsibility. And so she's going to be speaking about exactly what she had to do to make sure that they're in the right place because she can't have them in her home because of their needs. And
mhm.
so it's a real thing that is lifelong. It doesn't go
Yeah.
away.
Yeah, 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 and she can't care for them either. I mean, they're in their 70s as well, so that
Mhm,
means she's up there in
mhm,
age,
mhm.
and, there's limitations with that too, with the siblings taking care of other siblings. Wow. You've really opened my eyes. I didn't realize how big of a problem, like, just a
Yeah.
lack of services to care
Mhm.
for people who, have to care for kids, young adults, or that have autism, so
Yeah.
it's
And it's becoming
definitely
so
an
much more
awareness.
prevalent,
Yeah.
way back in the day, maybe we just didn't know what we didn't know, but there wasn't as many people diagnosed. And now many more people are getting diagnosed.
Yeah.
And so again, it's a big concern. That's what I'm
Yeah.
going to say.
Yeah.
And again, my small amount of expertise only touches upon the very minute tippy top of it. But there's so much more that we could unfold and discuss and uncover if we went on. We could have an episode every single day for probably 3 or 4 years and
Yeah, I
still
bet.
may not hit everything.
I bet. I bet. In filming your documentary and even just from being in the schools, your own personal experience, what are some suggestions or small steps that you could give to people who are not familiar with working with or being around people who have autism, just kind of to help them relate better or relate well to whoever they're around? Does that make sense? Does the question
It
make
does.
sense?
It's a very
Yeah.
good question. First off, I'd say if your child or the person you're referring to is in schools, keep a very close contact. Be a team together. So if it's a teacher and you need to learn more, stay connected with the family because they're with the child just as much as you are. If you are the family, stay connected with the school because the school has to be part of the whole programming, right? It is an all-encompassing kind of thing. Ask questions. If you don't know, this is a situation where there can never be a dumb question, right? And you can probably ask the question 75 times, I promise, and nobody's going to get upset with you. And if they're getting upset with you, then they're not the right people to ask the question to. There are support groups out in the world. It just depends again on where you live, what's out there. But if there are some that you can have access to, get into some of those support groups, because you'll find that a lot of people are dealing with the same kinds of things that you are. Take as much training as you can, especially educators. And I will say, I'll end that part with this. I'm speaking at an event on April 30, and I'm talking about how, as leaders and business owners, we have to understand the neurodiverse community as much as possible as well. Not that we need to know every single specific about every single spot along the spectrum, but we need to use our empathetic skills sometimes. We have to learn that not every employee is going to be your typical employee. Not every client or customer. Some of them, chances are, will have a neurodiverse condition. And knowing that, and knowing some strategies that you could utilize so that you can adjust and you're not just totally ruining the lives of everybody, right? Your clients, your customers, your employees. For example, I had a teacher one year who was on the spectrum. I didn't know it because of the fact that he told me, but I knew it because I just had this knowledge and understanding, right? I had my suspicion. When something would go wrong, I had to remember going into a conversation with this employee was going to be completely different than going into a conversation, say, with my daughter, who is a teacher, right? If it were my daughter or someone similar to my daughter, I might be able to go in and say, hey, this happened. What's going on? Let's talk this through. But somebody on the spectrum might not be able to process like that. And so you may need to understand different communication styles that you might have to use. And you're not going to know everything, and nobody's ever going to do anything perfectly. But just having the basic understanding. If you walked into a room, you were my employee, Sue, and you did something wrong and you're on the spectrum, and I start yelling, right? Because you know how some bosses can be. That's going to totally shut you down, and it might even cause you to respond with some negative behaviors that could then escalate and cause bigger problems. So, of course, nobody has to disclose what their conditions are, but you need to be cognizant when you start to understand. But it's all about understanding people too, as leaders.
Sure.
When you understand what works for people and what doesn't work for people, utilize that knowledge, because it's going to make your organization that much better anyway, right?
Yeah. Yeah. How would you have answered? How would you answer if you had suspected, that one teacher when they walked
Well,
in? And
yeah.
I mean, I'm trying to think from a leader perspective, or small business owner perspective. Like I don't even know how I would reframe what's going on in my brain. So, just what would an example be?
Well, knowing that typically everything tends to be more concrete, more black and white for people within the neurodiverse population, I think I probably would have started with, hey, I heard about the situation that happened. This is what my understanding is. This happened, and then you did this, because it's more of a yes, no, right? It's not an opportunity to go off into these other thought processes. What is the rule? The rule is, say, maybe it was you didn't come to work on time. I heard that you didn't come to work on time. And when so-and-so went down to your office at 8:05, you were not there. What time are we supposed to be at work?
Ah, I
8
can see.
o'clock.
Okay, I see the
Mhm.
difference. Yeah, I see.
So, what do we need to do? We need to do something different. Asking why, or is this, what's happening here? Those can be such broad thinking kinds of things that
Mhm.
it may totally put somebody off going, I don't know,
Oh, I get it. Yeah, I
spiral.
can see the difference. Yeah, I can see the difference between being more concrete versus going into the whys behind, "Hey, why were you late this morning?" And
Mhm,
then asking
mhm,
somebody to kinda come up
mhm.
with that. Oh, yeah, makes sense.
And it's
Uh,
not to say that you couldn't ever have that conversation. It's just
right.
that in the heat of that, they're already knowing they're being called into the boss's office, right?
Yeah, yeah,
That
yeah.
might not be the best time to have it. Maybe later on you could say, "Hey, remember when you were late? Tell me what was going on. Is everything okay?" If they're capable of having that conversation.
Yeah, yeah. So, are you actually working on another book right now,
Yeah,
or is it just
I
okay,
am.
let's talk about that.
So everything's
I
been
thought
sent
you
to
were.
the I know, everything's been sent to the publisher. I have 2 books
Nice.
coming out in May. I'm not sure when this will release, but May 7, The Heroes in Our Classrooms. It is an anthology with 8 authors, including myself, and we write about why we went into the world of education, some challenging times along the way, but then what did we learn about it? Because it really is a calling. And I will tell you, I was shocked when I watched the Today Show about a month ago, and they were talking about how universities are closing their teacher prep programs at some locations around the country because not
Really?
enough people are going into the world of education. And I
Yeah,
will
they don't
say,
want yeah, I can see why.
yep, it is. And hiring in my last season there, I mean, it was almost impossible. I had at least 5 teachers that were totally not qualified to
Mhm.
teach, but I knew them, I trusted them. We were giving them the supports along the way, but nonetheless,
Yeah,
they were
yeah.
not
Well,
doing
it's not a very high paying profession.
it's not.
You
It's
know,
not.
it's not, and they take a lot of flack, and there's a
Mhm.
lot of nonsense going on, and the parents are getting more challenging to deal with. Yeah.
This is just going to be again a tip of the
Terrible.
iceberg when it
Right.
comes to helping people realize that teaching really is it is hard, but with the
It
right
is.
support,
Yeah,
that's the key. If
yeah,
you have the right support and the right
I
training,
agree.
then it can be a whole lot
Yeah.
better.
Right
Um,
training, I get that. Right training, absolutely. And it's a mindset too. And
it
I think
is.
it's top
Mhm,
down from you being a principal and me being a teacher. I have been in school situations where I was not supported by the administration, and I know how that feels. And
mhm.
then I've been in other situations where I have been supported by the administration, and I know how that feels. So when you have the correct support system
Mhm.
in place, you can take what could be very difficult of a classroom situation and turn it around from a teacher perspective and be able to at least come out of it constructively without crumpling versus being in a classroom situation where you're not supported and you have no idea what to do when you've got something that you need support to control.
Yeah,
So yeah, yeah, I would say the teachers are struggling.
it is. It
There's
is.
nothing.
So this is going to be a great book though, because
Yeah.
I actually even I hand selected each of the authors, but I actually have my 8th grade language arts teacher writing
Oh,
it.
that's so cool.
So yeah,
Yeah, I can't wait to read that one. All right, so that one's coming out in May. What's the other
May
one?
7 on National Teacher Day. And then on May 28th, which is my 53rd birthday, my first solo book's coming out. It's called She Said Yes, and It Made All the Difference. And it does really talk about the 5 times in my life where I had some really hard decisions to make, like really hard. And my mind was racing and my fear was trying to take over. And I ended up saying yes. And then I talk about the lessons that I learned about myself along the way. So I'm
Oh,
excited
sweet.
for that one. Yeah.
I'm excited for that one too. That's a great title.
Thank
That's
you. Thank
exciting.
you.
Yeah, I can't wait. Well, my book just went off to the editor for second round. So,
Very nice. Very nice. It's so
we're getting
fun
there.
to know. Like, I don't know about you, but it was so therapeutic for me, right?
Oh gosh,
Yeah.
cathartic, I think is the word that I use.
Yeah,
Just
maybe. Yeah.
absolutely, yeah, it's absolutely cathartic. And I think just publishing it and getting it out there into the world, it's like part fear because you're putting yourself out there,
Mhm.
but it's part exhilaration because if you're writing at least, well, both of our stories anyway, our books are our own personal experiences and we're putting them out there. And if to me, if it just helps one person, then it was all worth it. It's
Absolutely.
not, I'm not looking for whatever it does, it does. It's really like you release it and you let the book be what it's going to be. I'm just doing it without expectation. It's
Yeah.
just like, is it going to be a bestseller? Okay, if it is, great, that's fine. But let's help some people along the way because honestly, it's almost a selfish work. Did you find like your book was almost selfish in a way? I just did it for myself just to get this thing done. But
Yes and no. I have
yes
to
and
say,
no.
I think honestly, my first book, the Unleash Her anthology, was a little bit more like that. I was just like, wow, look at me. I'm so cool, right?
I'm in a
But
book.
now it is really more about even the process of writing it. I sat down and reflected, what did I learn from that?
Mhm.
And that's where kind of it's taken. And I don't know if it's because it's, it'll be actually my fourth published book, or if it's my age. I don't know. I think I'm a bit older than you, but
No, we're the no, I'm no. No, I'm just a year younger.
okay.
That's it.
So I don't know what it is, but I feel like it's now, like you said a minute ago, it's about the impact that it can have on others. I
Yeah.
do want to get it out to every single person. I do want to hit the bestseller list. I'm going to tell you that honestly, only
I do
because
too, but I'm trying to keep my ego down on it. Like I wanted to hit the bestseller. Like there's a fear there, like, oh my God, it's gonna hit the bestseller list. That's kind of scary in a way, but then it's the other side. It's like, yeah, I can check that one off the box.
well, and
Dude, got
also
it.
when that's behind your book, then
Mhm.
more people will want to read it.
Yeah, this is true. This
Yeah.
is true. Yeah,
So
there's a lot of truth to that. How long did it take you to write this book? I'm just curious.
So I got approached at the end of December.
Okay.
Had no idea what I was going to write about. So it took me about 4 weeks or so to kind of gather my thoughts. And then I spent another week outlining everything. And then I started writing, and I would give myself 30 minutes every day to write. So it took I finished everything at the end of February.
Oh,
And then
okay.
it went to its first editing process. So hopefully now it will just be that process of letting it get to print, letting it go. But it will release on ebook on May 28th, and then paperback will come out 2 weeks later.
Oh, that's exciting. Well, I'm excited for you. I can't wait to read it. I think it's gonna be great.
I'm looking forward
So
to yours as well. So you'll have to be
thanks.
sure to tell me. Yeah. I'm a
Thank you.
reader. You can't be a writer without being a reader, right? So
This is true. Yeah, this is true. Totally agree. Sherry, this has been a lot of fun. I love talking to you. Um,
absolutely. Absolutely.
I have every podcast, I ask my guests the same three questions. So are you ready for that round?
All right, let's do it.
All right. Other than your books, please share a book or resource that's had a significant impact on you.
Okay, so can I share two?
Oh, absolutely.
All right,
It's your
so the first,
podcast.
perfect, perfect. The first one I have to definitely say is Think and Grow Rich. That one has been so profound, and not just that one, but Think and Grow Rich for Women, which they're about one and the same, but just a little twist, has really set me on a path of getting more focused in my business. So I definitely would say that one. And then the second one is the Dave Grohl autobiography, because I'm a big hard rock music fan. People don't really get that sometimes, because I was principal by day and hard rock girl at night. But I am a big fan of, I was a big Nirvana girl. I talk about that in the book, very 90s grunge girl. But Foo Fighters, they've been my favorite band for years and years. And Dave Grohl's gone through a lot with losing Kurt Cobain in Nirvana, and then now losing Taylor Hawkins in Foo Fighters. And he writes about those challenging times. Plus, his mom was a teacher, and she just taught him so many things about the world. And he's a good guy. And I don't know if people really get that, but it had a big impact on me as well.
Oh, cool. All right. The second question I ask sometimes opens a Pandora's box, and you can go talk for another 10 more minutes, which I don't care, but I love the question. So I keep it anyway.
Okay.
What's one question or topic you wish I would have asked about, and how would you have answered the question or expanded on the topic?
So, one question that I always think people should ask, I don't even ask it though. This is so funny. So it is opening a box, right? Who's had the most impact on your life?
That's a good question.
Yeah. And I have to say, I always thought it was my grandpa, because he always told me, you can do anything you want. But to be very, very transparent, it's my daughter. My daughter, I had her when I was 19, very unexpectedly, did not know, didn't didn't know what I was doing. I was getting ready to go off to college, and I wasn't married yet. I did marry her father, but lots of ups and downs through life. And I only have one. She's 33 now. She's getting ready to be married this year, so we're excited about that. But we've built a great bond, and that's from the hard work and always knowing. I didn't have a great relationship with my mom. As a matter of fact, we did not speak for years and years and years. And that started when I was 14. And that's a time when a girl needs her mom. And it made me not want to be a mom because I was afraid I was going to follow in her footsteps. And it happened. I became a mom, and I had that choice. It's one of the stories in the book. But when I made the choice to be the mom that I needed to be, it meant that I had to live a big life, and I had to live a respected life, and I had to live a life on the right path. And so I think she had the most influence on me.
Wow. Wow. There's a lot of similarities in our stories going back to like childhood and stuff. So I can relate. As we close, what is one small step that someone can do today that's going to help them change their tomorrow?
Wow, that's a good one. It's going to sound like a big one, but it's a small step. Okay. If you tell yourself you can, you're halfway there. Your brain believes whatever you tell it. So if you say, I can't do this, okay, then you can't. That's what you believe. But if you say you can, every day, you're going to find that you can do more than what you ever anticipated.
I love that one because it uses the power of the English language to really press in to the reality that what we tell ourselves really does matter. And I've done a lot of work on this too. And this is actually part of my book as well. The brain doesn't know the difference between fact or fiction. So if you tell it that you can do something, then you can go do that stuff. Isn't it in Think and Grow Rich? Doesn't he say if the mind can conceive it and believe it, it can achieve it?
Yep.
I love it. Great. Cheri, how can people find you, reach out to you, all that fun, good stuff that comes at the end of podcasts?
Absolutely. Of course, on the social medias, right? I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram, either Cheri Dixon or Cheri Dixon Consulting. You can email me, Cheri@CheriDixonConsulting.com is my new business email. I'm so official now, right? Or you can head over to my website. Again, I like to keep things simple, so it's just CheriDixon.com, and you can have all the links there to everything going on.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Cheri, for the gift of your time. I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. I cannot wait to talk to you again.
Absolutely. I loved it. And thank you, Sue, for having me. And for those of you out there, go be big. Go be big.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast. I value your time with me, and I seek to make every moment count. In order to make lasting change in your life, listening is usually not enough. So I want to ask you, what practical steps are you going to put into action today as a result of listening to this podcast? Remember, any step, any action, no matter how small, starts your journey to a big win. And if you're not sure where to get started, check out my website, personalcoachfinder.com, and find someone who can help. Remember, life doesn't get better by chance, it gets better by choice. Take small steps today and make your life awesome, friends.